This video is brought to you by Poolonomics. Why are there so many versions of chlorine? In this video, we'll go over the differences between free chlorine, combined chlorine, and total chlorine, and what they each mean for your pool. Let's start from the top. Free chlorine versus combined chlorine. Chlorine exists in your pool water as one of two chemical states, which dictates how it behaves and how effective it is as a sanitizing agent. First, you have free chlorine. This is the unused, active, and ready to sanitize chlorine you typically measure when testing your residual chlorine level. It's the most effective form of chlorine in terms of sanitizing power. You generally want to keep your free chlorine level around 2 to 3 parts per million, ppm, but this should scale up with the amount of cyanuric acid in your water. Next, you have combined chlorine. This is the used-up chlorine that's already done its job, and unlike free chlorine, you can't directly test for it in a pool. Used chlorine is also sometimes called chloramine, and it continues to build up in your water as free chlorine is used up. It offers little in the way of sanitation, and can actually reduce the quality of your water if left unchecked. Ideally, you should keep your combined chlorine level as close to zero as possible, but anything under 0.5 parts per million is generally acceptable. What about total chlorine? Total chlorine isn't a chemical state of chlorine, it's simply the sum of the two chemical states we just touched on. Basically, if you add free chlorine to combined chlorine, you get total chlorine. But since you can't directly test for combined chlorine, it's impossible to calculate your total chlorine level using this formula. Instead, total chlorine is used as a way to measure combined chlorine, not the other way around, as it's often written. Total chlorine is really just a means to an end, with the end being to find your combined chlorine level. It's not a particularly useful metric by itself. With all that said, if you take your total chlorine level and remove your free chlorine level, you'll be left with your combined chlorine. That's ultimately how it's used for maintaining a pool. Why do these levels even matter? Testing your free chlorine tells you how much chlorine is being consumed on a daily basis, and how often you need to add chlorine to maintain your free chlorine level. But if you don't know your total chlorine, you don't know your combined chlorine, which means you don't have the full picture. Specifically, you don't know how much chlorine has already been spent fighting contaminants and how much of that combined chlorine or chloramine is still lurking in your water. This matters because a buildup of combined chlorine will cause eye and skin irritation, give off a pungent chlorine smell, and even fade the color of swimwear, symptoms that are often wrongly attributed to high levels of chlorine or improper pH. In the end, knowing your combined chlorine level gives you much more insight into the conditions of your water. For example, if your total chlorine is much higher than your free chlorine, you know you have too much combined chlorine, chloramine, in your water, in which case you would deal with it by shocking your pool. And if your total chlorine is the same as free chlorine, you have no combined chlorine in the water, and you can sleep easy, at least for now. How to test free, combined, and total chlorine. Almost any pool test kit will allow you to measure free chlorine. This includes both test strips and liquid test kits. Liquid kits will give you the most accurate results, but test strips still work in a pinch. However, note that only some tests, and particularly some test strips, allow you to test for total chlorine as well, so it's important to buy a kit that includes both parameters. Remember, there is no test for combined chlorine. A test that includes both parameters will allow you to calculate combined chlorine by subtracting free chlorine from total chlorine. So there you have it, a complete overview of free, combined, and total chlorine and what they each mean for your pool water. Check the description below for links to our full companion article, along with supporting articles for many of the points discussed in the video. We also have a free downloadable and printable checklist to help with your pool maintenance schedule. You can get it for free at poolonomics.com/checklist. That's all from us. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for all things pool care.